I have a really bad habit of forgetting things that are really important. Any forgetful people in the room? Where you at? I forget things all the time, right? I say this often. If you're in a conversation with me and I'm not looking you in the eyes, guess what I'm not doing? I'm not listening to you. My mind is elsewhere. And Lindsay will stand with me and keep eye contact with you so that you know you are valuable and you matter. In my mind, it's just gone. The conversation's over. You got 2 seconds to catch my attention. Isn't that right, Chance? But the reality is that if I don't write it down, if I'm not paying attention, if my mind is wandering, I'm going to forget things. And I just struggle with this often. I saw a meme recently that said, honey, I told you that I would get that project done. You don't have to remind me every 6 months. Where the husband's at in the room. Some elbowing happening around the room. I was researching forgetfulness because I want to be better at it. You know, I want to learn how to get better at these things. And Harvard Health Review put out a study and a list of 7 reasons why people are forgetful. And I want to read them really quick. First one is lack of sleep. Where you at? Medications, specifically antidepressants, can help or cannot help, can make you lose memory. That's great. Thank you for that. Number 3, thyroid issues. Number 4, alcohol. That doesn't apply to anybody. We get it. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Number 5, stress. Number 6, anxiety. And number 7, depression. So if you're depressed, you're either going to lose it from depression or you're going to lose it from medication. I'm sorry. But I look at this list and I think, my goodness, no wonder why we are forgetful people, right? Because this is at the pace of life that we live in our culture and what we consider the hustle culture, where it's like, you don't need sleep, right? There's all these influencers that tell you if you're not waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and crushing your day by 9, then you're a failure. And you're like, you don't have kids or a life. Right? Like that's the push that people give, is like you've got to run, you got to run, you got to run. You can sleep when you die and like all the things. And it's like, no, the pace that we live, no wonder why we are forgetful people, because we live stressful lives. We live our life to the margins, all the way to the margins. Our anxiety is high. We don't sleep enough. And for me, it feels like I forget things way more than I remember them. This is confession time for me this morning. I want to talk today about the importance of remembrance, the importance of remembrance. In our humanity, we are forgetful people. We know this. We struggle with, for instance, like if you know somebody that goes to our church and you run into them in HEB, what are the chances you're going to remember their name? Or are they just, hi, pal, bud, hey, man? You know, y'all do that too? Like, is that just me? I need your help to feel like I'm doing okay. Because if I forget your name, it's going to be a, hey, buddy, pal, good old boy. Because I don't know what's happening, and I can't remember it in the moment. We are forgetful people, but we have to remember that God is anything but forgetful, but he is faithful. We are forgetful, but God is faithful. And so the challenge for us is to continually remember and to recount the moments of God's faithfulness in our lives as we go on year to year, to remember, to look back, to mark in our minds and our memories of what God has done. And so I want to start today by looking at a story that we all know pretty well in Genesis chapter 8. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. It'll be on the screen as well. Genesis chapter 8. This is Noah and the ark. Towards the end of the flood, this shows the character, the very nature of who God is in this story. And it says this in verse 1, chapter 8, verse 1. He says, but God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed, for the rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the waters had abated. Now, this is the famous Noah and the ark story. God makes this promise to Noah. If you will build this ark and you will bring your family, you'll put the animals on the ark. And I know there's a lot of questions about how does this happen and when does this, like all the things, right? We get that. But in this story, God says, if you'll do this, I will save your family and I will continue on this line of my creation of humanity as we go through the generations. And so here's this man named Noah taking this huge step of faith, building this ark that we know about, and he obeys in obedience, and then he faces the greatest storm that you could ever face, the greatest storm that's ever covered the face of this earth. I want you to think back for a moment to 2017. Do you remember what happened in 2017? Hurricane Harvey. You remember that when the city of Houston was just in utter chaos because of the floodwaters that were rising around our city. They estimate that over 1 trillion gallons of rain fell over Harris County alone. That is enough to fill the Astrodome over 3,200 times completely full. 1 trillion gallons. I specifically remember with my father-in-law, we crossed Cypresswood Drive in kayaks behind a jet ski because we couldn't get across the current. And I almost died. You think I'm kidding. I remember paddling as hard as I could in this kayak, and I'm going backwards, and my father-in-law and my brother-in-law say, "See you later." No, they didn't do that. But there was sheer terror on my face because I thought, this is it. I'm going to end up in the middle of the creek, and this is how I go out. 150 days Noah spends on this ark. This is an incredible storm that floods the entire earth, wipes off humanity from the face of the earth, other than the seed that God is saving for this recreation. In the middle of Noah's obedience, there's this storm that they're facing, and there's this chaos on the outside. Don't you think about this for a moment. Anybody that's ever been deep sea fishing or in the middle of the ocean on a boat, you know that there is a terror about the size of the ocean. There is a terror about it. If you want to be really scared, you need to go Google how much of the ocean is actually explored today. It's like very small percentage of what is actually explored, because the ocean is this vast expanse that is, we have some understanding, but we're still finding creatures and animals, and like it's just fascinating to me. And you sit out in the middle of the ocean, and you look around with nobody within an eye's view of you, and quickly you realize I'm a very small blip on the radar of this world. That has to be what Noah is thinking, as they are literally the only humanity that is on the earth, and looking out over the ocean and over the water that have flooded the earth for 150 days, 5 months. Noah was sustained, and his family were sustained by the faithfulness of God. And all throughout the scriptures, what we see is this thread that is woven from beginning in Genesis all the way to Revelation of God's faithfulness to his people and to his covenant. I heard it described this way, as the faithfulness of God is like a church bell that rings continually as you turn the pages of the scriptures. Because he's faithful to his word, and what he said he was going to do, he's going to do it. And it may not be in the time and in the way that we think it needs to happen, but he's going to be faithful to his word. And so I want you to think about this. Do you look at your life and see the faithfulness of God as a theme in your life? Do you look at your life and see the faithfulness of God in your life? Have you taken the time to mark the moments in the life that you are living right now where you can look back and say, I have moments that have marked my life and my mind of where God has been incredibly faithful to me and my family and my life? I hope that you do. I hope that you can recount those from memory, because it is a practice. And so here's the first thing that I want you to know this morning, is that your plan often looks very different from God's plan. Your plan often looks very different from God's plan. You know, we're just coming, like this is about the time of the year where everybody forgets that they made New Year's resolutions. And we, like all the things we said, this year is different, and I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna accomplish it, I'm gonna be like jacked and ripped and all the things. And like, and at the end of January comes, and you're like, give me the tacos. Right? Like you quit pursuing those goals and dreams, and I want to accomplish this and accomplish that. But you can make all those plans. That's not a bad thing to do. It's not a bad thing to make a plan of action and say, this is what I want to see and all the things. But when we look back on our lives, you can guarantee that what you thought was going to take place and the decisions that you thought you were going to make and the road that you thought you were going to take look a lot different from what you actually did. This is the reality of life. I think we could all in this room look back on our lives and say, man, I would have never written this story out that I have lived out in my life. In a million years, I would have never written that out. I would have never written that out. Because there are these moments that have marked us where we wouldn't have chosen a path that we took, but in the end, we're glad that we took it. Noah, I'm sure, as he was thinking about his life and his future, more than likely did not think, one day I'm going to be on a boat and all of humanity is going to rest on my shoulders and I'm going to live on a boat for 5 months. But it was a path that the Lord had for him. It's very different from what he probably dreamed about his life looking like. The life that God calls us to sometimes looks very different than what we dream up or what we plan out. And in the life of our church, as we celebrate 5 years today of God's faithfulness in our church family, this is the same story for us. It is the same story for us, is that even our church story looks a lot different than what we thought it was going to look like. What we dreamed up, or what Lindsay and I, when we first felt this call to plant a church, and it's like, this is what it's going to be like, and it's going to be like, we're going to change the city, like charge the hill, all the things, right? It looks very different for many, many years of what we felt like God was calling us to do. And 5 years is a big anniversary for a church. In the church planting world, they say that when you get to 5 years, if you can last to 5 years, because if you don't know this, the church planting world is not a very successful rate of people that start it and finish it. We see the stories, right? It is a low percentage of churches that plant and then last beyond 5 years. But they say in the church planting world that when you get to 5 years, that you are sustainable and you've made it. So congratulations, church, you made it. You made it. We are a sustainable church. This is not bragging on ourselves. This is to celebrate God's faithfulness. And I'll show you this why in just a moment. And so a little walk down memory lane, because what we see now is not what it always looked like. And so I want to show you this first picture that I'm going to show you this morning. This was our very first interest meeting as a church. We held it in my in-laws' living room, and we had a few people show up and a few people interested and a few people say yes, and we were thrilled. Like what we're experiencing this morning started in a living room like this. This is God's faithfulness. And you know, I understand like every church planter has this desire to like create this all the cards were stacked against us and we made it. You know, like that's what people try to like. But this is really like the church started as a few families that said yes. And I want to show this next group of people. This was our original core team. I think we have some of our original core team members here. At least they were here. Francois and Swanee are the Austins here. They were here. Where y'all at? Over here. The Austins, Josh and Sarah, Brent and Emily, these 5 couples, I just want to tell you this. These 5 couples committed more than you could imagine to building this church that we call Collective. These people we met with since early 2019. We would meet in a home and we would talk about the church. They met with us and said yes to the church before we even had a name, before we had any vision. It was like, well, like what's the vision? We're like, church. I don't know, but come with us and sacrifice your life and your family for the kingdom. You know, these folks, these families said yes to serving, to giving, to being in leadership, to helping us to coach the culture of our church as we were getting birth as a church family. And I just want you families to know that Lindsay and I are so grateful for the sacrifices that you have made to make this work today. And we love you guys very much. And then we went from there. We had our launch team. This was, here, let me just, for all the people that were at the school, there's a sick part of me that misses those floors. There's a sick part of me that misses those floors. There's a sick part of me that misses putting those tables out and ending up with peanut butter and jelly on your hands that has been there for I don't know how long. Parents, if your kids go to public school, send them with as much sanitizer as you could possibly imagine, because they work hard to clean. Kids are just messy. But this was our launch team. This launch team, what was with them is we kind of set up in the fall of 2019. We would set up starting in October, and we would set up our service. We would have service for ourselves. People were available to come if they wanted to. Like, we didn't turn people, no, you can't come in. We didn't do that, but there was not a lot of people showing up. Like, it was our team, and we would set up and we would say, you know what, that didn't go very well. We need to add this, and kids ministry, we got to get some dividers because these kids are wild, and we got to do something. Like, there's like all these things that you're trying to figure out, because y'all know this, right? You get one chance to have a first impression. And so we want to make sure, like, let's get our feet under ourselves for a little bit before we make our big public launch. And so that was our soft launch in 2019. And then in January of 2020, January 26th, this church, as we know it, was born. January 26th of 2020, the same exact date that we have today, except for the year. We had an incredible launch day. Some of y'all were there, and you've been with us since day one, and we're so grateful for that and the long-term partnership that we've been able to have together. But we had this incredible launch day. There's almost 300 people, and everybody's like, what? Like, we're just fired up, and like, there's all kinds of visitors and friends and family come to support you. You never stay at the number like that your launch day is, but we thought, like, hey, this is great. We've launched a church, and we're on the right track. And we were on top of the world until we weren't. Y'all know where I'm going with this, right? Because 6 weeks after our launch day, the COVID shutdown took place. Lindsay and I were on the way back from a church planting conference in Orlando, and this is before it like really got serious, but I remember being in the airport, and we started seeing a bunch of people with masks, and we were like, that's different, because it's Montgomery County, and no one did the mask thing, and so we got to try to figure out, like, this is different, maybe this is just the norm for other places. And we flew back, and we're all excited and thinking about what are we going to do and how are we going to change the lives of our people, and how's it like God's leading us. And then we get the call from the school that, hey, we have to shut down. And so I remember the amount of like stress and anxiety in my life in those moments. For most of my life, I would say that I didn't really struggle with anxiety or anxious moments. I struggled with fear on some things, but anxiousness was not really something that was a part of my life until this time, where I started to wonder, like, how in the world, like, are we going to do this? We're 6 weeks in. We just launched this church. Like, we've given our lives, and many families have given their lives to be a part of this. And how is this going to work, and what's going to take place? And so, like, I would wake up in the middle of the night, short of breath. Like, I didn't know what to name it. I'm pretty sure it was a panic attack. Is that what they call it? Because I had it. And I'm like, what are we going to do? How are we going to make budget? And like, this isn't going to work. And so we started to stream our services, and I just wanted to bring this out as a moment, as a monument of remembrance. Remember these tubs, Francois and Jordan? So we didn't know what we were doing. So you can see go to the first picture of streaming. This was Josh Masters was our worship director at the time, and Carly, who's still singing with us. We streamed in my office over off Tamino Road. Right around the corner by the climbing gym. We rented an office from another church that was in there, and it was a little 10 by 10 office, and we put an entire band in this office. And we had no clue what we were doing. Actually, we had decided early on in our church life, from an ecclesiology standpoint, we weren't going to stream because we want people in the room, in the building, rubbing shoulders together. And I'm a little bit of a grump when it comes to church stuff because I grew up in the church, but online church is not church. You can fake it online, can't you, right? Like, amen, good stuff, love it. Like, and I don't mean this rude, but I don't really care what people are doing in Wyoming if they're watching our church in Magnolia. I want to know what our people are going through and shepherd our people. And so churches, I'm not saying that if a church streams their services, they're awful and all. That's not what I'm meaning. I'm just grumpy. You have to get over it. So we went to Best Buy, and we bought this. We had no clue what we were doing, and I pulled this out for sake of Casey O'Quinn, who helped us. This is a streaming device that is used for gamers. Like you can stream to Twitch. I'm not a gamer, so I don't have no clue anything about gaming. But we bought this, and we didn't even use it. And it's still in the box, Casey, because we had some other churches step up to the plate. And what happened was we started streaming these services. Eventually, we went, Jordan and Tara, who own Ruthie Grace in Montgomery, they said, hey, we have this warehouse. You can use it. You can paint it. You can do whatever you want. So we went and, wow. Somebody needs to text Josh. Like, thank you for that, Josh. And he's no shoes on. Makes it even better. Our homeless worship leader at the time. And we streamed in this little warehouse spot, and Jordan and Tara opened up the spot for us. And like, I remember, I'm wondering, like, am I an essential worker? Am I allowed to be out? Like, am I going to get arrested? Like, is this China? What's going on? And I'm thinking, like we have like getting to this warehouse and trying to figure out how to stream, and preaching to a red dot for 13 weeks was awful. And so, this wasn't the story that we thought that we were going to be played out in front of us. And so I want to show you 13 weeks after streaming, I want to show you a picture of our church in the summer of 2020 after we came back in person. And so from that picture makes me emotional because we see what God's been doing in our church family, and it's sometimes easy to forget of where you came from and where God's brought you to. And as this past week, we've been looking at these pictures and just celebrating what God's done in our church family. We started to set up and have services in person again, and I remember we would be lucky to have 40 people in a room, Casey, something like that. And it was like, if we hit 50, like, we've tripled our attendance today. This is amazing, right? Like, we have no clue what's going on. We don't know how we're going to pay the bills. We don't know, like, if I'm being really transparent and honest, this was the hardest season of ministry in my ministry life. Because I was worried about so many other things, and it brought up all kinds of issues and mental health issues for myself. I can promise you this. We went from almost 300 people to about 40 people in a few short months. And I had no one calling me, asking me what we were doing to grow the church, I promise. Actually, I could have written a book about, here's what you don't need to do if you're going to plant a church. Don't plant right before COVID. First of all. Second of all, in my launch day sermon, it's on YouTube. You can go listen to it because it was a pretty good joke. But I joked about COVID just like it was Ebola, had no clue what was about to hit us. It was fascinating. Actually, somebody in our church about a year ago came up to me and said, hey, I was looking at your old sermons, and I noticed you made a joke about COVID in your first sermon. And I was like, wow, you went back and watched all of those? That's impressive. What we're experiencing right now as a church and the growth that we're experiencing is coming off of a really few hard years. I would have planned our church's story this way, but one thing I can tell you is I believe that it made us a stronger church, and I believe that it made me a better pastor. Because what it did is it took every bit of pride out of my life and said, you know what? You have to rely completely on the Lord. You can't rely on anything that you would consider to be successful around you. And any Enneagram 3 people in a room, performers, where you at? You're like, what is Enneagram? Is that witchcraft? Maybe, I don't know, but I'm an Enneagram 3. I'm a performer. I want people to see that I'm doing good, that I'm doing like, hey, good job, Derek. Like, you ever want to see me smile, just tell me, good job. And I'm like, yeah. That's me, right? And so it stripped all of those things away from me. It took all the humanity out of the church growth world and all the things like, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what success looks like. Let's look back at Genesis chapter 8, verse 1. But God remembered Noah. If you're taking notes, I want you to underline that word remembered. God remembered Noah and all the beasts and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. Now, first of all, think about being on this ark. If you're on this ark, this is your only place of safety. There's literally nothing else. There's chaos around. The world is literally suffering and being destroyed by the Creator because of the sinfulness of man. But there's safety and security on the inside of the boat. And I bring that up because this is what a life of following Jesus is supposed to look like. is that there may be chaos around you. There may be trouble and storms around you, but on the inside, there should be a sense of peace and security, not because of anything that you have done with your life or how you've structured your life, but because of the goodness and the mercy of Jesus. That is the only reason that you should have the peace and the security. So, this word remember here, but God remembered Noah. It's an interesting one because what it seems like it communicates is like that God forgot about Noah being on this boat. Like almost like you ever put something in a microwave and then find it the next day? You know what I mean? Like you open the microwave the next morning, you're like, there's my coffee from yesterday afternoon. That's a mom move right there because you don't have time to sit and drink your coffee in peace while it's warm. So you got to keep heating it up while your husband's sitting at his desk with a nice warm cup of coffee. But it's not like God is in heaven. Oh goodness, I totally forgot about Noah and his family and the entire hope of the world on the boat. I better go check on them. No, that's not what's happening here. God is not forgetting. He's not forgetting Noah. He did not forget Collective. He has not forgotten you, but he is remembering the promise that he made to Noah. And what this word really carries a meaning of is that he is acting on the promise that he already made. So remembering does not mean that he had forgotten, but that he is remembering. Have you ever felt like God has forgotten you? If we can be honest with ourselves in the room, if you haven't felt like God has forgotten you, then you probably haven't been living for Jesus very long. Because there will be seasons and moments in your life to where it feels like there is nothing but storm after storm, chaos after chaos, where it feels like your prayers are not being answered, and you find yourself like the psalmist that says, why are you so downcast, my soul? Or David in Psalm chapter 6 where he says, my bones ache from suffering. Like, God, why are you so slow to respond to me? This is the beauty of lament that we see in the scriptures, specifically the Psalms. We have this chaos around us. Have we ever felt like God has forgotten us? And I just want to give you a simple, this isn't a life-changing reminder, but it's needed, and I believe it's for someone today, is that God has not forgotten you. He has not forgotten you no matter what you are facing. The Hebrew word here for remember is the word zahar. It occurs about 235 times throughout the Old Testament. This word zahar, it carries the meaning of, or is usually translated in some form of the verb remember. That is not saying God forgot, but it highlights that he's acting on his promise or his covenant. And I remember those early days as a church, those first few months after COVID, where we were streaming and we came back and there's not a lot of people, not a lot of resources, and we're trying to figure out what's happening. And I'm going to be really transparent. You know what my least favorite question was that first year of planting our church was, how's the church going? It was my least favorite question. I didn't want to answer it. Because I didn't really want to be honest that I don't think it's going very well. Actually, it's really hard. We're killing all of our volunteers and our team, but it's fantastic. You know, that's what, I felt like I was being insincere if I was to, like, I just move past it. I don't want to answer it. I remember being in prayer about the church, and often during this time, my prayer was this, is that God, you called us to plant this church, and so if this church is going to work, you're going to have to make it work. And now I get to stand on the stage 5 years later, and I can say with confidence that God remembered the call that he put on Lindsay and I and those first 5 couples that said, yes, we want to see a new church and a new work coming in the city of Magnolia. That's the faithfulness of God. But it looks different than what we thought it was going to look like, right? His plan often looks different than our plan for our life. The second thing is that the remedy for forgetfulness is constant remembrance. I know it doesn't make sense. Follow with me for a second. The remedy for forgetfulness is constant remembrance. In the business world, they tell you all these tips and tools of like how to remember people's names, right? Like they tell you, if you don't remember somebody's name, you shouldn't be in sales, because if you can't remember their name, then you don't show value and all the things, and you're like, I guess I'm a failure at life. Because names can be difficult to remember. And they tell you all the things, right? Like to remember the name, you got to repeat their name 3 or 4 times in the conversation. Nice to meet you, Al. So good to see you, Al. Al, tell me again, how do you spell Al? Don't do that one, okay, if it's Al. Maybe if it's Alfonso, but not Al. But the reality, like you have all these tips and tricks, like if you just do this and you'll do that, you can remember. Think about a unique character, Jim with the big nose. Like you can remember Jim with the big nose. Like you have all these tips and tricks. Y'all do those things? Everybody's like, do I have a big nose? Johnny with the bad breath. Okay. That's why we have mints in the lobby. Chill out. But all these tips are about memory, right? Are about repetition. Why do you think your parents, I don't know what they do today, but kids, let me just tell you, we used to go through so many stacks of note cards and index cards when we were studying for tests. Where are our index card generation at? Come on, where are you at? Your parents used to make you, like, one after another, like, boom, 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 boom. Nope, go back, look at the back. Okay, there's the answer, all right. You know, you just had to, it was repetitive. The best way to not forget what God has done in your life is to consistently remember it. How often do we, in the busyness of our life, God brings us through something, God delivers on a prayer, then something automatically doesn't go our way, and then we constantly put all our focus and attention on what didn't go our way, what we think should have happened, didn't happen, and now we have completely forgotten all the times that God has been faithful and provided and done the things for us. And it's like, God, how could you not show up in this way? The interesting thing is that God knows that we are forgetful beings. After all, he created us. Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. Amen, Bronx. Joshua chapter 4, 1 through 7 says this. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you, and lay them down in a place where you are going to lodge tonight. And then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, each man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, pass on before the ark of the Lord, your God, into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of tribes in the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. And when your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. To give some context, the people of Israel had been traveling and wandering in the desert. There's a season of disobedience. Moses disobeys, and God allows an entire generation to pass away. Joshua comes into power to lead the people of God, and as he does that, he leads them into the promised land. And right before they go into this promised land, they cross the Jordan River, God tells them, I want you to take one man from each tribe, the 12 tribes of Israel, and I want you to get them to grab a stone. And once you go across the river, I want you to stack these stones up as an altar in remembrance of this moment. Remembrance of this moment. Why? So that when the next generation asks, what are these stones for? You can talk about the faithfulness of God. You can talk and recount the faithfulness of God in the life of God's people. You can talk about how God remembered his people and how he never forgot them. And so I want to ask you this morning, what are the moments in your life where God has shown up for you in a powerful way, and you can look back and see, like, this was God activity in my life. I wouldn't be where I am today if God had not done this moment at this time and provided in this way. Do you have those moments? Can you recount them? Do you think about them often? Do you think about how God has shown up in these ways and you're like, wow, this is mind-blowing. I can't even believe. Are they an altar of remembrance for you? I know that we have them as a church. I want to celebrate just for a moment of what God has done in our church over the last year, just the last year, okay? So keep that in mind. Over the last year, we've seen around 14 people get baptized here at Collective. 14 people that say, yes, I'm going all in with Jesus. I'm a public profession of my faith. I want to stay accountable to my church family. We have around 50 men that are in a discipleship program that are meeting twice a month, going through scriptures and books and spending time with the Lord. Thank you. One hand clap. We had over 50 ladies that were a part of our fall women's Bible study this last year, and that was incredible. Good job, ladies. We started Collective Students with Blake and Lindsay Colson. We became official owners of this property 1 year ago today. We've been able to support over 10 missionaries and mission organizations on a monthly basis because of your giving and your sacrifice that you get to be a part of today. From Curacao to Cuba to Haiti to Ecuador, here locally, it's just incredible. You're a part of planting churches across the city of Houston because of your giving and your support. Just last week, I was with a group of planters, got invited to go down with Houston Church Planting Network and sat with a group of planters that are either in the first year or about to plant their church all across the city. One of them is planting in a neighborhood called Sunnyside, if you know where Sunnyside is. He's giving everything to see this city and this community transformed for the kingdom of God. And I got to go down and spend some time with them and share a lot of the story that I'm sharing with you this morning. Of God's faithfulness. It doesn't always look like what you think it's going to look like, but he's faithful. And then lastly, in the last year, our church has grown by over 37% numerically. These are stones of remembrance for our church. These are not bragging rights and to say, look what we're doing. This is none of that. This is for us to look back on and say, look how God has been faithful to us. But not just the church. I want you to think about, where's God been faithful to you? Where has he shown up in your life? Maybe you're here today and you feel forgotten because of what you're walking through, what you're going through, the season of life that you're in. Maybe it's this simple act of meditating on his past faithfulness that will remind you that he's not forgotten you. I want you to bow your heads with me.